I made this game using 7 different AI tools, and it only took me a single day. AI gave my zombie a second face on its chest, Unity nearly gaslighted me into insanity, and my cat got extremely mad at me because of this experiment. But here is how it all happened. It's 2025, and even though we still didn't invent Mumble number 6, and dogs didn't yet evolve to see the full color spectrum, I think it's safe to say we live in the future. Previous generations got to witness firsthand inventions like the polio vaccine or the internet. Meanwhile, our generation gets to experience even greater inventions, like fridges that text you when your milk is anxious, or NFTs of dancing hot dogs selling for more than our yearly salary. But one thing that undeniably shapes our future is AI. And whether people like it or not, AI is here to stay. Game developers can either ignore it completely or figure out how to incorporate it into their toolkit. Thing is, using AI to make a game doesn't have to mean selling your soul, infecting your game with sloppy, uncontrolled vibe code or crappy art that makes your game look exactly like every other AI slop out there. In this video, I want to explore AI-powered tools that don't fully rely on generated assets. Tools that speed up development, cut costs, and let people without years of game dev experience turn their idea and creativity into their game. To put these tools to test, I decided to make a simple game in Unity, with a few assumptions. First of all, since I have a full-time job that eats most of my time, I only have one day to create a game from scratch. Second, since I've got bills to pay and a shrimp-needy cat, I don't want to blow a ton of money using these tools. And third, I don't want the AI doing the whole thing for me. I will use generated assets when it makes sense, but not if it makes my game look like a family photo where the family tree is a straight line. The idea is quite simple. I want to make a 3D roguelike game similar to Vampire Survivors with a slight twist. Instead of just surviving hordes of enemies, you're also building your own little army of minions to help fight them off. Before jumping into the engine, I decided to test the concept using AI. With the Ludo AI tool, I wrote a short prompt describing the core assumptions of my project, and it spat out a simple but working 2D prototype I could immediately test and iterate on. Just like in Vampire Survivors, the player character attacks automatically in a loop. Each defeated enemy gives the player mana points, which can then be spent on summoning skeleton minions that automatically attack the nearest enemy. Playing around with this prototype quickly gave me an idea. What if the player could choose how to spend their mana points? Either on spawning more skeletons or by a random ability like a new attack or a health potion. A single prompt handled that, and within seconds, I was able to test how it felt in-game. And as I expected, having to make those choices in the middle of endless enemy waves felt overwhelming. So I decided to move these decisions about which ability to choose to the calmer moments between waves, when the player can actually breathe. At this point, I was only about half an hour into the project, and I had already tested and locked down some of the most important elements of the gameplay. Sure, the Ludo prototypes looks shitty, and we are nowhere near creating a proper game from an AI prompt, but that's kind of the point. AI's role here is to speed up the ideation process, not to make the entire game for me. And honestly, I wouldn't want to live in a world where movies and games are made entirely by AI with no human touch. If I wanted some entertainment without passion, I would just go to cinema and watch War of Worlds.
It's you!
Oh, and it's worth to mention, the prototype made in Ludo didn't cost me anything, which is good for both me and my cat. It means more shrimps for him. With the ideation phase done using an AI prototype, I created an empty 3D Unity project and installed the second AI tool for this experiment, the Unity AI Assistant. It is basically a built-in AI plugin inside the Unity editor, with 3 main commands. The first command is ask, which lets you throw questions like AI on the wall, why is my frame rate lower than my cholesterol? Or in my case, after importing a 3D Leech Wizard model for my main character into the project, dear AI assistant, why is my model pink instead of the color of a Leech Wizard?
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture.
And the AI actually nailed this question. It pointed out that the material on my model used a shader that wasn't compatible with the project's rendering pipeline. A classic Unity headache. Fair enough. A quick material conversion fixed it. Still, it kinda felt like one Unity tool pointing out where another Unity tool had screwed up. And I wanted to see if the assistant could help speed things up in a more practical way. My game is set in dungeons, with maze-like corridors full of monsters. I imported a 3D dungeon environment from the asset store and asked the assistant to generate a 250 meters long, or for my American viewers, about 2.5 football fields long, dungeon layout automatically, using the floor tiles I provided. Since this was an actual task and not a question, I used the run command, which lets the AI directly modify the project. To my surprise, the assistant actually spat out the corridor structure I was aiming for. It needed some cleanup, mostly overlapping tiles, but still, it saved me time compared to doing everything manually. Encouraged, I pushed further. I asked it to detect the corridor edges and automatically place debris assets I selected as natural dungeon walls. That's where things fell apart. Instead of admitting it couldn't handle it, the AI gaslighted me pretending it knew what to do, then spiraling into an endless loop of thinking.
Just give me a moment, I know what to do.
Okay, Grandpa, let's get you to bed.
Got to admit, that's the same strategy I use at work when I don't know what I'm doing, but in the end I had to force close Unity and rephrase the task. This time, instead of detecting wall edges, I asked it to simply place the environment assets I pre-selected at suitable spots in the corridors. That did the trick. Finally, I had something that started to resemble a dungeon layout. Still, I also learned the AI's limits. And I'll have to finish the level structure manually later, which I wanted to do anyways, to give my level a human touch. The next big task was to turn my Leech Wizard into a functional player character, which means adding a top-down camera, arrow key movement, and a rotation towards a mouse pointer. Here the AI assistant was surprisingly helpful. It generated the scripts, attached them to right objects, and even added the extra components needed to make everything work. With the basics in place, it was time to create an enemy that could actually react to the player. For my first enemy, I grabbed a goblin model from the asset store. It came with idle, walk, attack, and death animations. Basically everything I need for an enemy in my simple game. I mean, it's just a roguelike prototype, not a Kojima game where an enemy can literally read your mind or die of old age if you take too much time to get to it.
He's dead.
What the hell happened?
Maybe it was from old age.
It was his dying wish to fight me, but I disappointed him.
The logic for my enemies was simple. If the player is far away, the enemy just stands in its spot, playing idle animation. If the player gets within about 6 meters, it plays the taunt animation, then starts walking towards the player, and when close enough, it starts attacking in a loop. The AI assistant generated scripts that matched the behavior I wanted, but when it came to playing the right animations, things started to break. Even though the goblin knew how to taunt, chase, or attack, the animations kept glitching, switching randomly or not playing at all. I had to step in myself and found the issue. The problem was in Unity's animation system, which for some reason the AI assistant couldn't make any direct changes in. Once I sorted that out, the assistant helped me finish the enemy by adding a damage system, so the goblin could finally hurt the player. And since the enemy could now hurt the player, it was only fair to let the player fight back. After all, this is a video game, not a holiday in Detroit.
Take him to Detroit. No! No, not Detroit! No!
Just like in my Ludo AI prototype, I wanted the player to automatically attack in a loop, with the player having to time their movement so that the attack actually hits the enemy, similar to how it works in Vampire Survivors. With a few simple scripts made using the Unity AI assistant, along with a few scripts and fixes that were just faster to do by myself, I got my Lich character playing attack animations on repeat and dealing damage when the hit connects. Once the enemy health drops to 0, it plays a death animation and then simply despawns. I also added some feedback when a hit lands. Usually this is done with a hit reaction animation, but since this is a top-down game with lots of enemies on the screen at once, I decided to just make the enemy flash red for a moment when it's hit. At this point, the simple corridor layout made with Unity AI Assistant started to annoy me with how rough it looked. So I took some time to hand place proper elements like walls and debris to close off the dungeon, and then some bridges to separate the rooms, along with building a proper nav mesh for enemies to walk on. To wrap up the main combat loop, I grabbed a VFX package from the asset store and added some effects to player attacks. So far, the Unity AI assistant actually saved me some time, especially with less creative and repetitive work. The next step seemed perfect for it, hooking up combat with UI so that the player and enemies have health bars. Simple, right? Well, not really. The AI did spit out something that looked like a health bar and even placed it in the right spot, but then it tried to connect it to logic that didn't exist at all, which just caused more errors. Basically, it invented functions out of thin air. And again, I think this is exactly the kind of task AI should be great at. But right now, for some reason, Unity's AI assistant doesn't get it at all. After wasting way too much time fixing the mess, I just built it myself, asking the AI assistant's ask command whenever I encountered a weird problem. One health bar in the corner for the player, and small ones floating above enemies' heads. Done. Now it was time to focus on the best part from my 2D Ludo AI prototype, the skeleton minions. For the model, I grabbed a cartoon skeleton from the Unity asset store. The problem was, it didn't come with all the animations I needed. No attack animation, and the walk cycle didn't have the goofy vibe I wanted. So I brought in another AI-powered tool, Cascadeur. And unlike some tools that try to do everything with AI, Cascadeur uses it to simply make animation process easier and faster, without taking away the fun stuff. Perfect for a total animation newbie like me. I imported my skeleton and ran it through the Cascadeur's auto-rigging system, which I guess means I created a skeleton for a skeleton. Then I tried the auto-posing tool, which uses neural networks to make any pose look natural. Within about, a minute, I had a working attack animation. And then the Cascadeur flexed even harder. With one click, it added physics to the animation. Little details like body parts shaking in a natural way, stuff I wouldn't even know how to do myself. And they were just there, with a simple click. That would normally take me more than an hour, but with Cascadeur it took me under 5 minutes. And honestly, it still kinda blows my mind. Especially since my personal knowledge of animation is about the same as my knowledge of cars. I can use them, but don't ask me to build one. With a solid attack animation ready, I wanted to test it in Unity, and that's where I hit the catch. Cascadeur is free to mess around with, but you need a paid subscription to actually export your animations into Unity or Unreal. In the end, I decided to bend my low budget rule and grabbed the indie subscription for a month. It costed me $8, which means My cat's getting about $8 fewer shrimps this month. But please don't tell him that. The shrimp situation is quite a sensitive topic for him. Now that I had exporting unlocked, I added the attack animation into Unity, then quickly made a walk cycle with the same AI-powered in-betweening, auto-posing, and physics. And finally, I whipped out a super simple idle animation. Cascadeur is an example of where the AI shines the brightest. Instead of taking any creativity from the creator, it enhances and speeds up the process. I will definitely stick with this software for future projects. With all the assets ready to turn my skeleton into a battle-ready warrior, I wrote a longer prompt for the Unity AI assistant to make it alive. After fixing up some smaller issues within the code it spat out, I had my skeleton following me and attacking enemies once it got close enough. But there was one problem I left on purpose. When the skeleton reached an enemy, its attack killed them in a single hit. I already knew the issue. The skeleton was spawning way too many attack hitboxes. But I decided to use this bug as a testing ground for another AI tool I wanted to try, Copilot, which is an AI coding assistant operated by GitHub. My idea was to see if other tools that generate code have the same problems as Unity's AI assistant. After setting up Copilot and describing the bug in a simple prompt, it just fixed it. And it even looked cool while doing it. With that sorted, I finally had my little skeleton mafia crew following me around and attacking anything that dared to even look at me funny. Adding Copilot to my AI toolbox sped things up a lot. With just a few simple prompts, I set up coin drops from enemies, added a summoning system with a proper player animation, all that with basically no issues with the code Copilot generated. It was time to add variety to my enemies. And like any respectable game, mine needed a zombie. At first, I grabbed a zombie model from the asset store, but it looked way too realistic for my cartoony style. So I tried another AI tool, Meshy 3D, to generate a cartoon texture that matched my goblin. After a few nightmare fuel attempts, I finally got something usable. The only problem was, Meshy AI doesn't really get that zombies used to be people, so it gave my zombie a second face on its torso. Creepy, sure, but not the kind of creepy I wanted. Fixing that texture in Meshy required upgrading to a paid subscription, and my cat already rejected further cuts to his shrimp supply this month. So I decided to do something different. I turned to another AI tool, ChatGPT. I fed it some style references from my game and asked it for a cartoony zombie concept. It nailed it on the first try. Then I took that image back into the Meshy's Image to 3D tool and got a proper zombie model. From there, I used good old Mixamo to rig the model and add needed zombie animations. And then, using the same Goblin logic, I now had a working zombie. Slower than Goblin, but stronger with its attacks. To finish my enemy roster, I pulled a big orc model from the asset store and, reusing the same AI-assisted setup, turned it into a mini-boss with more health and harder attacks. To finish the main gameplay loop of my game, it was time to add the abilities system. Here, Copilot flexed its strengths again. With a simple prompt, it created a solid framework for me to easily add new abilities to the game, along with handling logic for each ability and the reward system that grants them. It boils down to this. After player defeats all enemies in a room, the game system lowers a bridge to the next room and spawns a rewards chest near the cleared room's exit point. When player walks into it, they are presented with two randomly selected abilities, and player has to choose one ability to add to their inventory. To generate icons for the abilities, I initially tried using OpenArt AI, but the style of each generated icon didn't quite match the general style of my game. Here, yet again, ChatGPT came in with a clutch. As an example, to generate an icon for the ability to grant one additional minion for the player, all I had to do is send a screenshot of the skeleton's model and ask the chat to generate a UI icon that references this model. The abilities I made for the game range from a healing flask that fills players' health to 100%, increasing players' main attack speed or damage, increasing the amount of minions player can spawn, to new attack abilities like Firefighter Attack that spews out cones of flames that burn enemies every 2 seconds, a chance for any player attack to curse an enemy, which turns the enemy friendly towards player and hostile towards other enemies. And then my personal favorite ability, the Bonesplosion, which makes it so instead of simply despawning at the end of their life, minion skeletons explode, dealing heavy damage to anyone that's near explosion. Having such variety of abilities to choose from, each run started feeling like an actual roguelike game. Player can decide to choose their approach based on abilities they picked. With a few more post-processing tweaks in the Unity AI assistant, an endless room spawner made with Copilot, and some sound effects generated using the last AI tool in my stack, 11 Labs, the game was basically now done and playable. The crazy part is, the whole thing took me less than a day. From the initial idea, to the 2D prototype in Ludo, to stacking up all these AI-powered tools, a project like this would normally take me at least a week. And that leads me to my main point. Whether people like it or not, AI isn't going anywhere. It's ours, meaning game developers' job, to figure out how to use it to speed up repetitive tasks, but without sucking the creativity out of making games, and without making every game just look the same and using AI slop assets. On the screen you can now see all the tools I used for this project. I don't think this is a perfect and ultimate toolkit yet, but testing those tools definitely shows how especially solo developers can save time and cut down on the ever-rising costs of game development. That said, AI-generated assets are still a big gray area. Even with a small side project like this, I avoided relying on AI to do everything. And to be clear, if I wanted to continue and eventually release this game, I would only use those few AI-generated assets as a guideline for an artist to polish, not as a final content for something players would pay for, meaning the final assets would have to be done by human. If you are interested in games and how they're made, check out other videos on my channel and subscribe not to miss out on future ones. If you made it this far, I think you'll be interested in some of the game design breakdown videos I recently made. See you in the next one. Bye!